This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Kurt Zickler. On the 39th floor of a large New York apartment, two young men were lounging about after a strenuous game of tennis. The blue tendrils of smoke from their pipes rose slowly to be drawn away by the efficient ventilation system. The taller of the two seemed to be doing most of the talking. In the positions they had assumed, it would have been rather difficult to be sure which was the taller, but Robert Morey was a good 4 inches taller than Richard Arcott. Arcott had to suffer under the stigma of runt with Morey around. He was only 6 feet tall. The chosen occupation of each was physical research, and in that field Arcott could well have called Morey runt, for Arcott had only one competitor, his father. In this case, it had been like father like son. For many years, Robert Arcott had been known as the greatest American physicist and probably the world's greatest. More recently, he had been known as the father of the world's greatest physicist. Arcott Jr. was probably one of the most brilliant men the world had ever seen, and he was aided in all his work by two men who could help him in a way that amplified his powers 1,000-fold. His father and his best friend, Morey, were the complementary and balancing minds to his great intelligence. His father had learned through the years of work the easiest and best ways of performing many of the difficult feats of laboratory experimentation. Morey could develop the mathematical theory of a hypothesis far more readily than Arcott could. Morey's mind was more methodical and exact than Arcott's, but Arcott could grasp the broad details of a problem and get the general method of the solution developed with a speed that made it utterly impossible for his friend to even follow the steps he suggested. Since Arcott Jr.'s invention of the multiple calculus, many new ramifications of old theories have been attained, and many developments have become possible. But the factor that made Arcott so amazingly successful in his line of work was his ability to see practical uses for things, an ability that is unfortunately lacking in so many great physicists. Had he collected the royalties his inventions merited, he would have been a billionaire twice or thrice over. Instead, he had made contracts on the basis that the laboratories he owned be kept in condition, and that he be paid a salary that should be whatever he happened to need. Since he had sold all his inventions to Transcontinental Airways, he had been able to devote all his time to science, leaving them to manage his finances. Perhaps it was the fact that he did sell these inventions to Transcontinental that made these lines so successful. But at any rate, President Arthur Morey was duly grateful. And when his son was able to enter the laboratories, he was as delighted as Arcott. The two had become boon companions. They worked, played, lived, and thought together. Just now they were talking about the pirate. This was the 7th day of his discovery, and he had been growing steadily more menacing. It was the great Transcontinental Airways that had suffered most repeatedly. Sometimes it was the San Francisco Flyer that went on without a pilot, sometimes the New York-St. Louis Express that would come over the field broadcasting the emergency signal. But always the people were revived with little difficulty, and each time more of the stock of Piracy Inc. was accumulated. The Air Guard seemed helpless.